Assalamu alaikum. The question is, should the Taliban become moderate and liberals like the Northern Alliance in the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan? So, the Taliban, now known as the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, fought the Northern Alliance. Well, they were together during the Soviet invasion, and they fought the Soviets together. But after the Soviets left, it left a power vacuum where there were a bunch of groups that formed into what was called the Northern Alliance, and then there was the Taliban that absorbed all the Islamic groups, and they fought for, I think, 2 years. And the Northern Alliance was about to be completely defeated until the United States invaded the country in 2001, I believe. And then the Northern Alliance was propped up as what was known as the quote-unquote Islamic Republic of Afghanistan by the United States. The Taliban were pushed to the rural parts of the Afghanistan country, and the population centers were mostly under the control of the Northern Alliance for 20 years while the U.S. occupied the country until they withdrew their support. After 20 years, they couldn't stay in the country anymore. The Northern Alliance was completely depleted. They were losing dozens of soldiers every single day. Lots of equipment was being taken. There were a lot of insider attacks. So the U.S. cut its losses, and within 10 days, the Islamic Emirate, or the Taliban, I'm going to call them the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, conquered the entire country within 10 days. It gave a general amnesty to the entire country, meaning all the soldiers who were fighting on behalf of the United States would be forgiven, and this is why they were able to conquer the country in 10 days, because a lot of the soldiers didn't think it was worth giving their life up to protect the previous Afghan government under Ashraf Ghani, and I'll explain why. And they decided to drop, their weapons and cooperate with the Taliban. So the questioner is asking, should the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan become more moderate and reflect what was once known as the Northern Alliance, which was ruling the country up until 2021, I believe? The Muslim answer is no. They should not become more quote-unquote moderate and become a puppet to the United States or some other superpower, as we're seeing with many Muslim countries. They're just client states. They're not independent and decentralized, and they push the interests of foreign countries over the interests of their own people. So the reason I'm saying no is because 99% of Afghanistan is Muslim. So we Muslims don't want a secular leadership. We want an Islamic leadership with Islamic law, or Sharia law, if you want to call it. The only reason they called the previous Afghan government the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan was to appease a lot of the Muslims. There was nothing Islamic about it. It was just Islamic by name. It's one of these things that the mushrikeen do. They attach the name Islam to something, and they hope that the Muslims just, okay, cool, it's Islam, It's kind of like when Biden said Assalamu alaikum to the people. Oh, it must be great for the Muslims. No, that doesn't mean anything. It's just they're putting they're beautifying it, So the reason why the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, or the previous Afghan government, failed was because it was very corrupt. The leader embezzled hundreds of millions of dollars on his way out of Afghanistan, and a lot of the generals were making millions of dollars, and most of these people weren't even Afghans. They were just the United States military. It was like a mafia, kind of a circle. The money was being printed and sent to them. What's his name? Julian Assange explained the whole reason why we were in Afghanistan. It wasn't to win the war. It was to prolong the war and have a lot of money going into the weapons manufacturing industry, which would make the U.S. government a lot of money, a lot of politicians money, etc. So there was a lot of corruption involved with it. Anyway, the soldiers of the previous government, the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, were very corrupt as well. They used to charge tolls, random tolls on roads. They wouldn't let people travel to work or back home without paying some random extortion tax. And so this is one of the reasons why a lot of the soldiers just dropped their weapons and, didn't bother fighting the Taliban. When the U.S. withdrew their support, the money was gone, and two, they didn't want to support this corrupt government. So that's just one part of the question. So the other part of the question is, should they become more moderate? Well, I think the Taliban are moderate. I mean, if you want to look at what's extreme, just look at ISIS. ISIS showed the world who was really extreme. The Taliban are moderate. I mean, if you can explain to me how they're extreme, I think a Muslim being committed to the religion isn't extreme, and then that this is Islamophobia at its finest. Some of the things they could point out to are that the Taliban banned education for women. They did suicide bombings, right, during the war. They're partnered with, quote unquote, other extremist groups. And we'll go one by one here. Starting with the women's education, I do agree that women should be educated. From what I've heard from people over there, there are actually education centers open for women in the private sector, private schools. And even in the rural parts of Afghanistan, the only places that there aren't education centers open to women are places like Kabul, where a lot of the women there were conditioned by Western morals, if you will, and it doesn't fit what Islamic morals are. This is what the Taliban are saying. They say that they want to fix the education system to make it more Islamic. This has been the excuse for a couple years now. So that is an issue. They should be allowed to be educated. I do think personally that the whole college system is a scam. I think if you want to just get educated, you can pick up a book and read it. You can learn online. Women can get an education online in Afghanistan as well, for example. Education isn't banned. What's banned is the accreditation, getting the degree, because in Islam, women don't have to work, whereas men have to work, because Allah says in verse 434, men are the maintainers of women, so that they have to support their financial expenses, their clothes, their medical bills, their food, housing, etc., etc. The men have to provide all that money. Islam doesn't ban women from working or getting education, but it doesn't encourage it either. When I say education, I mean towards working. Where Islamic education and other factors like, that are beneficial to society are completely encouraged between both genders. So the whole college system is a scam. You're spending, tens of thousands of dollars to get a piece of paper. What college should be is you doing the job for like a year, like under someone else who's really good at the job, and then you just learn how to do it, and then you just take over the job. Or you do the job somewhere else. You know how to do it now. It shouldn't just be you sitting in a classroom for 4 years. So with that in mind, I don't mind, certain educations being banned worldwide, to be honest. Colleges, that is, you can always get educated anywhere, like I said. The second thing is that could make them labeled extreme is that they partner with certain groups. A lot of these groups came and supported them. So, of course, they're not going to turn their back and sell them out just because the United States or Europe or China thinks that they are extreme. What I say is one country's extremists are another country's freedom fighters. The Turkestan Islamic Party, the Uyghurs from East Turkestan, occupied by China right now, are labeled as terrorists by China, but not by the United States, and vice versa. They all have different groups in Afghanistan that are safe and seeking refuge there and whatnot that some country doesn't like. I don't think it's, as long as they're abiding by the laws of Afghanistan, then there's nothing extreme about that. And the third excuse is that they did suicide bombings during the war. Well, in Islam, there is a difference of opinion on this issue. One opinion is that it is haram. It falls under the rulings of suicide, which is one of the worst sins in Islam. And it's the opinion I believe in. I do believe suicide bombing is haram. The other Islamic opinion is that if it's done for the sake of, with the intention in mind of causing casualties and damage to the enemy, then it's not counted as suicide. In fact, they are martyrs. This is the position that the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan has adopted, and we have to respect the other opinion, just like in any other case. We have 4 schools of thought in Islam. They don't agree on everything. We agree on like 99% of things, but that 1%, we have to respect the other person's opinion. I don't think that it's extreme. We saw Ukrainian soldiers blowing themselves up to take out bridges in Russia during the Russian invasion. I mean, we saw Japanese kamikaze jets during World War II. It just happens when you're outgunned and outnumbered. You're going to resort to those type of tactics. So I understand why they did it. So, I mean, if, other things that you might consider extreme are probably part of Islamic law, such as stoning the adulterers and adulteresses, death penalty for apostates and homosexuals and spies, black magicians, etc., are all part of Islam. And no one's holding anyone hostage in this country. They can always leave to the United States if they want to live in a secular area. But Afghanistan is 99% Muslim. Most of the people support Islamic law. So, and Islam fights the public sin. So no one can get punished for those things unless they're doing publicly. You need the 4 male witnesses for adultery, or video evidence, or a self-admission. So it's very hard to get that unless they're doing it publicly or they're doing it on video to advertise it and spread the sin. Same with the apostasy punishment. Can't get punished unless you're bragging about it and telling everyone, right? And same with homosexuality. Like if you walk by a window in Islam, and if you walk by a window, you see 2 guys having sex, can't say anything. You have to conceal their sin. You're just one guy. If they're doing it publicly, 4 people see it, then that's not a private sin anymore, and they will be punished. So this is how Islam operates. It fights the public sin. Assalamu alaikum.